On today's show of Lions Gray Manes, we're decoding All-Star Week, breaking down the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl performances that could shape Detroit's championship window. Forward down the field.
Down to the 10, Smear to the 5, Smear to the end zone, touchdown Detroit Lions!
Hand off Berry, skirts to the left side, breaks the tackle, and he will take it in, touchdown!
Touchdown Detroit Lions! That's what I'm talking about! It is caught! Touchdown Detroit Lions! Amon-Ra St. Brown! Oh baby, what a play that time! Aiden Hutchinson read that and blew it up! Big time stand by that defense!
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Lions Gray Manes. My name is Chris Stone. I'm at castahead.net, and the other gentleman on the screen making me look absolutely invisible, my man, Dan Keener. How we doing, man? How we doing?
Not bad.
Okay.
It's Tuesday.
It's Tuesday. It's 7 p.m. Eastern. And if you're not joining us live, you're joining us on replay, you miss this gorgeous gentleman who is the Chief Intelligence Officer of Lions Optimism, my man, Dr. Brent Kreider, DBC. Brent, how we doing? It looks like you have the most political thing going on tonight on the show. Gibbs
I was voting
Laporta
for
24.
Gibbs and Laporta. Yeah, that was my vote. Write-in ballot, baby. Gibbs Laporta.
Right. Awesome.
Yeah, they have these players sponsored sites that you can get these types of T-shirts. There's a lot of good ones like this.
You know what?
Nice.
I think every show that we've had, Dan, Brent has worn something different every single show. I think he's kind of like, you know, that girl in high school that you never saw a different outfit from her, and you were just like, well, how does she have so many outfits? Brent, how do you have so many Lions T-shirts? It's amazing.
Well, the show is called Gray Manes for a reason. Over all these years, the opportunity to buy Lion shirts at every game, and the wife's like, you know, you really don't need more T-shirts. And I probably should count them someday, but I have a couple hundred shirts at least, T-shirts alone, not counting jerseys and jackets and hats and all that Lions fans buy. And I'll tell you what, remember 20 years ago when the Lions were terrible? You couldn't find good Lions gear anywhere.
That's true.
I literally have a black Ernie Sims jersey, so yes, I understand exactly what you're saying.
What is that,
I liked
50?
Ernie
Is that the
Sims.
number, 50?
It was number 50.
Oh,
That's another-
yeah.
That's another name we should have put on the list, right? For the Hall of the Underrated.
Right.
That
Ernie
kid had
Sims.
so much potential.
Yes, Reggie Brown, Ernie Sims. There's some great linebackers.
Reggie Brown. That brings back so many great memories. And you mentioned the Hall of the Underrated. We're going to have another segment later on in the show for the Hall of the Underrated. I'm very excited about that. But we've got some great stuff to roll into tonight. And as always, the first thing before we start to roll into the All-Star games and the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl and all that great stuff, DBC has got, he has got this thing all on lock. Before we go into that, we're going to start to talk about some recent Lions news, some weird contract stuff that's going on, Dan, and some other stuff. So let's roll into it.
Yep. Yeah, so yesterday it came out that both Levi Onwuzurike and Josh Pascal, two guys that we kind of were writing off after another injury-plagued season, we found out that they actually are back and under contract in 2026 if the Lions choose to keep them. There's a couple of quirky provisions in the collective bargaining agreement that basically says if a guy gets put on the IR or put on a reserve list, in this case NFI for one, and the other guy was on the what was the other one?
PUP provision.
PUP, thank you. So they both went on it before the season started. So the provisions, there's two different, they're both in Article 20, Section 2 and 3, but basically for Pascal, he was on the non-injured non-fi list. You know, he had some surgery with cancer and some things like that. And anyway, if they were in the final years of their deal, which they both were, and they were paid their entire salary for the pup, which Levi was, and they did not activate or able to play as of the sixth game of the year, then their contracts told. So both these guys will be back, assuming they are healthy. I mean, they missed all of last year for a
Right,
reason,
right.
right? I think Anru Anruz Anwuzike, I think his was an
Anzurike.
Anzurike. His was an ankle, I believe. And Pascal, we still aren't clear. I think they might have brought up back at one point, but he's also had some, battled some cancer and things in the past too.
Right.
So now the cool thing is that both these guys, they were actually trending up in 2024 before they either got injured or the season ended. They were actually playing pretty decent for, finally starting to turn the page. I think they were second or third rounders. A lot of fanfare with these guys. Supposed to be depth at D tackle and edge, and it just last year sucked because we didn't have them, and we
Mm-hmm.
were rolling some guys in. Now we got Tyleek in there. We still need help at edge, so we'll see where that goes. But the other quirky thing is in the off season in the NFL, your top 51 contracts count towards your salary cap. So you have to keep the top 51 as of the first day of the year, which is in March. I don't know, it's like the 18th or 13th or something like that. You have to be in compliance to salary cap. Well, both these guys, they were, I think, 1.5 million and like 1.8 million. So they kicked a couple of the cheaper contracts out of the top 51. So now we are an additional, almost 1.5 million in the hole. So we got to clear a little over 8.5 million between now and start of the new league year to be in compliance. But of course, we need more than that because we've got guys who need to resign, like Laporta and possibly, um, new free agents coming in the door and so
Right.
forth. So, but that's the first one. The next thing, just a little self promotion for the org here. We're giving our website a bit of an upgrade this off season. We're working on expanding some sections, cleaning some things up, making it look a little bit nicer. So, feel free to go to the graymains.com. We'll have a lot of expanded draft data on there this year that we haven't had in the past, including a brand new piece that we're running that we're putting together is we're tracking all the interactions that are taking place with players, starting with these all-star games, which Brent's going to get into here in a minute. So the American Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, the East-West game, and then rolling into like top 30 visits, the combine, virtual visits, pretty much anything that where the teams talk to these players. Because one thing we've noticed over the years is that Brad does tend to try and grab guys
Yeah.
that he has had talked to or someone on the staff has been involved with at some point. So, and that's about it for the breaking news. I'm not going to have Brent give me questions to ask like SNL, and he's not going to give me questions to ask, thankfully. So our wives will be happy about that. But I'm going to throw it over to Brent if you're ready, and move on to our next topic.
Yeah,
which
I
he's
do
done
want
some
to
great work on.
let's sort of dovetail on what Dan said, and then we'll roll into the segment about Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl. Brent, let's have you comment on some of this stuff. Levi and Josh Pascal, these were guys that obviously we drafted fairly high, and they have shown flashes of talent. Talk about what this means, in your opinion, Brent, to from a defensive line depth perspective, and what's a realistic expectations for both these players?
Well, I think this just again, there's more evidence here of of Holmes's ability to maneuver. Right? We
Yep.
we sometimes have folks who are big critics of Holmes, and I'm amazed at some of the things that he comes up with that are new, and it's rare. It happened this year a couple times with Campbell in terms of rules and things like that. But they do a fantastic job of understanding the collective bargaining agreement and how to maneuver the contracts to the Lions' advantage. And look, these if healthy, I think these are two really good pieces to the defensive front. I don't think there's a downside to this at all. I think it's a situation where the Lions need, with all the free agents that we have pending on the defense, as Dan's pointed out a number of times, 2 linebackers under contract, and we have the need to kind of restock that front with DJ Reader and Lopez being free agents. So we can either re-sign. We've suggested that we look at re-signing Reader on a friendly deal, and Lopez certainly proved his worth this year. So it just adds more players, better players than the depth that we might have had last year. So
Right.
I'm happy with what's happened here, and I'm ecstatic with the fact that we can focus, because when we get into the discussions here in a minute about the draft, and specifically for this particular pod is the players that participated in the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl, and so when you can narrow your focus and you can say, I don't have a need immediately at these positions, I think it just sets the Lions up really, really well with the players that are going to be available where we're picking.
I love that. So let's transition into that. And so we're going to get in the heart of tonight's show. We want to shout out to those who have joined us live here tonight. And if you're catching this on the replay, Facebook, X, Twitch, YouTube, wherever, join us live every Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. We get into it, and getting into it like Chase, who's joining us, he says trade Levi and Pascal for 7th-round picks. Too many injuries, can't count on them. Wanda Rich, always in the house. We appreciate you, Wanda, for joining us. A person, as far as I know, Atlan, who has reposted the stream. We appreciate you for joining us tonight. And so, Brent, let's talk about it. Let's get into the heart of the show. The Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl have wrapped, and now we've got a treasure trove of tape and performance and data to analyze. DBC has been grinding through every practice rep, right? And every game snap. You don't have a day job, right, Brent? You put together a comprehensive breakdown of potential Lions targets from these all-star games. Outstanding breakdowns that we've seen sort of behind the scenes, some of which has been posted, other things haven't been posted yet. So, Brent, let me roll it over to you. Let's break it down. How does this relate? How do these games relate to Detroit, the Detroit Lions? And if you're a fan, why do we even care about these games? And why does it matter? What does Brad Holmes do as it relates to these games? And what can we expect as we approach April and the draft?
Well, this, in historical lore, the Lions' best days every year for us long-suffering Lions fans were draft days.
Right.
And Dan was so gracious to, over the years, to use a number of different mediums to put all the Lions fans in our Lions chat on different mediums to be able to talk about the draft during the draft. And we're going to do that this year, but we're going to do it on a podcast. And Mike's gonna head down here, pick up Dan. Chris and I live about an hour and a half from each other, so you're going to get to see our lovely faces for the better part
you
of those.
You must drive fast, because I think it's more
days.
like 2 hours, but okay.
Yeah, I drive fast. It was my time in Germany, I think, because driving the Autobahn is a beautiful thing.
There we go.
And speaking of
his
that,
daily driver is a fast car. Well, actually, I think it got commandeered, didn't it, Brent?
no, it's still in the garage. I don't go anywhere anymore except to fly up to Detroit to go to Lions games and Tigers, Pistons, Red Wings, Michigan. I mean, I'm all Michigan sports, but so this year we're really looking forward to it, and we've set up a series of these podcasts over the coming weeks to where we wanted to take a look at the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl, and don't let Dan and Chris fool you guys. They are going to jump right in like fish to water once we start getting into this. We were joking around before we went live, and they're like, "Oh, this is the Brent show," and I'm like, "Wait till we start talking a little bit. Dan's going to have a lot of thoughts," and so we every year on this chat, we debate, who should the Lions pick, and inevitably you're wrong way more times than you're right, and which is part of the frustration. We just know who the Lions should pick every year. But this year we're going to take a little bit of a different approach. So the sessions that we'll do here with these podcasts, first week is to look at the Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl. Over the course of the weeks, we'll build up to preparations for the combine in Indy, and we're working on getting media access to a lot of these events. Mike Terry has been so gracious, as he always is very helpful in so many ways. He is the original gangster, if you will, for these podcasts, for the Gray Mains podcast. Dan and I came up with this idea 5 years ago now, guys, and so thanks to Chris, it's actually taken off. But this session we're going to focus on these two bowl games, the players, but I want to start this off by saying, let's debate a little bit what we think are the Lions' positions of need. As you guys, for those of you that have looked at the Gray Mains, there's been quite a few looks on the Gray Mains page, and we can post the link here for you guys to go and take a look at the analysis that Chris was referring to. We made some assumptions. We made some assumptions that the Lions have needs at certain positions, and we'd love to get feedback from you guys. Chase, thanks for the comment about making some trades on the draft this year, and I'm a big fan because of the way this draft is teed up, and the Lions trading down. Now, who wouldn't love to have Arvell Reese or all these studs that are at the top 11 to 12 positions? Then what you've got after those top picks is a whole series of players who are a real grouping of up to 60 players after those top 12-ish players. And so, the Lions, the more picks that you can make in that grouping, I'm a big fan of trading down multiple times and stockpiling second round picks. And Dan and I have been kind of going through this. So Dan, would you mind telling folks what you think are our priorities in terms of positions of need, if you will, in this year's free agency and draft? And we'll get into free agency too later, but this is more for the draft.
I think a 1A and a 1B, they're kind of interchangeable, and it's basically whoever the best player is when we draft, but it's got to be edge and O-line. Our O-line, we've got a crisis looming. If it's not this year, it's next year. Decker, Glasgow, both are either going to be cut or retire. If we're lucky, Decker gives us one more year. If he gets surgery and becomes healthy again, he's been a warrior, but he played so hard and limited this year. And then edge, we haven't found anybody to go opposite of Hutch at this point, that consistently can play. And there is a lot of really good edges in this draft, especially kids that were playing in these bowl games. So Brent's going to cover a handful of these guys that just look phenomenal, that are going to be available in that 15 to 50 range. Where we're going to be picking if we stay put. Those are my top two, and then the next one is linebacker. We need another backer. So what if Sonny Styles falls all the way down to 17? Do you pass him up? He's probably one of the best. He's like the prototypical off the ball linebacker that's out there right now. They laughed at when we took Campbell. But
do we think Sonny Styles is going to drop that far? I mean, I don't.
No, I just said, what if he does? I mean, we didn't think Terry Arnold was going to fall to 14 2 years ago.
That's true.
20.
Dumb teams are at the top for a reason, right? And so they're going to take shots at quarterbacks, right? And quarterbacks that should be in round 3. Right?
Yes.
We had a dumb team that took a wide receiver every year. And
we should invite him on our podcast. He doesn't have a job anymore.
Who's that, Matt Millen?
No, that'd be our buddy Quezzy up from Minnesota. Okay. He took a third round quarterback at 10th overall.
Yeah.
Smoked him. He killed his own team. Anyway. The last couple positions are DB and tight end. That's kind of my big ones, right?
That's where I was going to kind of get us back on the train tracks here, which is
Bernie,
normally Chris's
tracks.
job.
Just get the train off the tracks. It's coming at us, Brett.
Yeah. It's normally Chris going, oh, let's circle back to where we were supposed to be on this particular podcast. But I think, I know Chase has expressed his opinions about positions of need in the past, and I'll say, for me, it starts and ends with offensive tackle, because there's a premium for left tackles and rush edge defensive ends. And so I think that there are going to be opportunities for the Lions here to pick at those premium positions. Look, how many years can you say that there are 5 or 6 offensive tackles that would be potentially available in the first 2 rounds that could fill that need?
Hmm.
And we know the Lions are built on their ability to run the football. Lions, it begins and ends with play action pass, running the football, being physical, being able to protect Goff, who's not the most mobile quarterback. So I would, if I were to say, if I had a choice between a stud left tackle and an edge at the first pick, if we stay at 17, I would lean more towards going with the offensive tackle. And it's only a couple names that I think that I personally would be interested in. I don't think there's any way Magoa is going to drop down. He's a road grader. Spencer Fano, who I would love to get on the Lions offensive line if he were to fall to 17. And again, the point Chris and Dan were making is that bad teams stay bad for a reason. And so
Yeah.
you just never know what is possible. And Dan made this argument a couple shows ago. What happens if these guys are there who would be at a premium position, at a position of need for the Lions? Would you make a trade and trade up? The argument I would make there is we have very limited capital. We have a number of positions that we need. And if you think that you can fill those, when Dan was talking about the secondary positions, linebacker, safety, cornerback, defensive backs, if you think you can fill the cupboard, if you will, from the third round beyond, because we don't have a lot of capital until we get to those third and fourth round, the fourth round picks. We do anticipate potentially getting a third round comp pick, but in essence, even if you get a third round pick, it becomes a fourth round pick
Well, it's
because
gone
so
already,
late.
though.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
We traded that third round comp. We don't have a third rounder. One went for Tesla, and the other one, I'm not sure if they both went for Tesla, but the
They
one that
did.
we
They
would have
did.
gotten
There's
for
multiple
Glenn
picks. Yeah.
and our own, they're gone. So I think there's some debate whether it's a fourth or a sixth, but there's one coming for offsetting of Zeitler.
Yep.
But we just don't know where yet. It's a couple different projections, but it's going to be interesting. There's a lot of depth to your point, Brand. There's a lot of depth at edge. I would agree with you that when we're on the clock, unless there's somebody that's not supposed to be there, or if we see somebody that's falling that we move up for. I mean, we don't have a lot of draft capital this year, but we do have unlimited draft capital because we can tap into next year.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's a lot of teams do that. The Rams have done that historically, and Holmes has been a part of drafts that have done that when he was with the Rams. And so, I mean, Brent, great points, by the way. And I think one of the things that we have to realize is, like, we know we have gaping possibilities, gaping holes in the offensive line. We've got guys that are going to retire, if not this year, potentially next year. We don't know what's going. You got to put Ragnow as like a, long shot, right?
Yeah.
Decker, probably not. Glasgow, yeah. See ya.
He's
like
gone
it's
either way, I think.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of stuff, and we've got a lot of pieces going on, and so what are they doing here? And so there's a lot of players, and so Brent, I want to talk to you about specifically Senior and Shrine Bowl. Were there any players that you saw coming out of that? Was there any buzz that came out of this? Like, listen, at this point, we're like, everybody has eyes on the Seahawks and the Patriots. Whatever's going on with the flag football game that might be happening now that they call the Pro Bowl games and all of that kind of stuff. But like, when we look at potential players that the Detroit Lions might be able to look at from a Shrine Bowl, from a Senior Bowl perspective, these are guys like we can name a ton of players right now. We can name like 15 players from not just last year, but like, years prior that not just the Detroit Lions have gotten, but other teams have gotten. So what teams, Brent, or what players sort of rose out of these all-star games that you saw that, are kind of like, hey, these are players that could fit for the Detroit Lions?
Well, it starts with an offensive tackle from Arizona State, and Dan and I were trying to figure out over the weekend how to pronounce his name, and I was watching the game and
Max,
like
let's just call him Max I. Should we call
Hennicore, and turns out I think that's how you pronounce his name. But he really had
Yeah.
a fantastic showing. So if we're going with offensive line, and you consider that we're trading down beyond those folks that I already mentioned, the two tackles from Utah and Miami's Momoa. I mean, there's few players at that range of 17 to 23, 24, 25 that would be worth selecting at offensive tackle. And to Dan's point, it's about value, best player available. Um, and so at the end of the day, Hennicore really stood out as a guy who could come in and play left tackle quickly. He reminds me a lot of the kid that was drafted last year by the Seahawks. He was out of South Dakota, and he's pretty polished. He's got equally adept road grade kind of capabilities. Big physical kid. The main players from the Senior Bowl on the offensive line would be a Hennicore, and then there's a couple other players at positions later in the draft who really wish themselves. We had James Brockermeyer, who Miami Hurricanes back a few weeks ago, and so that he's a guy in the third round who the Lions could pick up and take a look at getting him as a player. He was described as a day two all-star. He was consistently strong against the best pass rushers. He's a guy that we could plug and play at the center position. And if the Lions decide to forego tackle for those targets that we talked about, and they go after a center to kind of fill in and address tackle in free agency, then that's a definite way that they could approach it. So center Brockermeyer, pick up the free agent from the Ravens. There's just as you piece this together, we could get starters from these Senior Bowls and Shrine Bowl players as easily as we could get reserved or depth players if Ragnow were to come back. I still think you need to address it because we saw this year injuries took a toll.
Yeah.
And if you start knocking players out of the game, I'd be seriously concerned if we have to go into this season with the offensive line the way it was last year.
Yeah. So Dan, we're talking a lot about trenches, and we know that this is a huge need for us, but we also know our fan base. Right? And we also know the flashy picks and somebody that casually flips on ESPN and the NFL Network and pulls these things in, and they see all these other players and they're like, why aren't we getting this player? Why aren't we getting this particular player? I mean, how would you address that? From a Lions fan perspective, what you've seen historically from the Millen era, to the Quinn era, to the Holmes era, how would you address a fan who said to you, why aren't we going for player X, who's the wide receivers, who's the running back, all of these players who are on the fringe that may not necessarily be needs from our perspective, but definitely are from a trench perspective.
Well, I think let's just get it out there. There's 4 positions that we're probably not going to touch in the first 2 rounds: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and probably tight end. Depending on the health of Laporta, who everything seems to be, he'll be okay. That's round 1 and round 2. There's no way we're taking those positions. Number 1, there's no quarterback worthwhile. Number 2, we have Gibbs. The only reason we would have to go for running back is if something happened with the Monty, where we traded him or something, and we had, somebody was too good to pass up. But honestly, this is kind of a weak running back class. The value is down in the like fourth and fifth and sixth rounds with it. Where you're going to find guys that are good workhorse backs, dual threat, dual purpose backs. There's not a lot at the top. There's a handful of guys, obviously, the kid from Notre Dame and stuff. But as far as wide receiver, we just invested ungodly amounts of money in two of them, and we drafted Tesla last year. We put a bunch of draft capital in. We're not drafting a wide receiver. I would be surprised if we even drafted one this entire round.
Yeah.
We still got Meeks.
Yeah.
We still got the kid we drafted last year. So
great depth. Yeah.
tight end, that's the tight ends are not a great group this year. There's some good guys that could fill in again, bottom like fifth, sixth round. I don't see us going after, the big guys, the primetime guys for tight end. You've got essentially, the Sadiq from Oregon. He's a first round talent.
geez.
After that, you don't get anybody to like Claire or Stowers who are like third round guys.
But maybe good fits for our offense. I mean, Petzing is
could be
like he's
depends what you're looking for though.
Yeah,
Are we looking for a
right.
blocker? Are we looking for a receiver? Are we looking for a multifaceted guy?
right.
So I got my eye, and I'm not going to say I'm being a homer, but I got my eye on a former Ohio State guy who was at the Senior Bowl, mind you, at like down in like round 6, 7
Former
area.
Ohio State guy.
Well, he just graduated.
He finished
Oh,
his
okay.
prison stint.
Okay.
He did finish his prison stint. Him and Maurice Claret, they hung some Grey Goose together after.
Maurice Claret. Oh God.
Hey, Claret's turned his life around. That guy has become a
good.
very,
Good.
very good community leader, and he hangs
Awesome.
around the program. He has really done well to turn himself around. But we're not here to talk about Maurice Claret.
We'll do a show
but-
on Maurice Claret later for sure.
So to get back to the answer to your question, take those 4 out of it. And obviously the trenches are disaster or disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah.
You've got the defensive line's in better shape than the offensive line. The defensive line is one key player contributor away at the other edge from being a dominant unit, right? As long as they're healthy. O-line, got 2 guys that are cut, retire, injured, whatever. We've got 2 youngsters at the interior. You got Sewell, who could play left tackle if we draft a right tackle. So there is some flexibility there. We don't know what Frazier's gonna bring to the table, but he was ranked as like anywhere from the 3rd to 5th best interior offensive lineman last year. We got a steal getting him in the 5th round.
Yeah.
So
and that could happen this year, right?
yeah,
Dan? I mean,
absolutely. Guys slipped down.
And we've got a lot of picks in multiple 6-round picks, and
Yeah.
and we anticipate another comp pick in the 6th or
Somewhere
7th
in there.
round, somewhere in that range. And I think that's going to be the approach that the Lions are taking. I agree 100% with your philosophy that those 4 positions are not going to be our 1st and 2nd round picks. Frankly, there's nobody worth picking other than Sadiq, the kid from Oregon, in that range, and he's gonna be a target for somebody who's in desperate need of a tight end. So that grouping of Max Clare. In the Senior Bowl and Shrine Bowl, there were some players that there were too many drops for my liking. The Stanford kid Sam Roush had a few drops. The kid from Vanderbilt, Eli Stowers, they're not finished products, and they lack the ability to receive to be good receivers. You want people. We can pick up guys who can just block. In fact, we picked somebody up last week. One of those street free agents that we picked up. So if you're not going to get somebody that's going to be able to be a receiver, and then I don't think tight end becomes a real priority in this draft at all, but just because of that lack of depth. So then we go back to the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl and the analysis that we did on the players that are going to be at those positions of need. And every round there were multiple players at positions that we have indicated may be a priority for the Lions to look at. And so going into the later rounds, a guy that really made a big mark, who's a position of need, who if we do trade down, and I really liked him. And when Dan and I were chatting over the weekend, Zion Young, edge from Missouri, he had a fantastic week, and very physical. Another kid who, near and dear to my heart just because he's a Michigan guy, but I wasn't the one that brought him up. Dan was.
I
Derek
like
Moore.
production, man, and he was productive.
Derek Moore, physical defensive end. So we had another kid, Western Michigan, Tucker, who made mark in the bowl games. So a lot of these Thompson from Illinois, and then a kid that I really liked. I was hoping Michigan could get him. He was on Michigan's radar multiple times when he was going through his recruiting, and then when he transferred. Damani
Oh
Jackson,
yeah.
cornerback.
Yep.
He's a lot like uh, Terrion Arnold in that he's physical, and he was a 5-star. He just I
He's
think he
very
kept putting himself in bad.
he's a press guy, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he kept
Yeah.
putting himself in bad situation. I mean, he should have picked a school that was gonna, help him to develop. And unfortunately, a lot of players, they go to schools thinking it's going to be one thing, and they end up having to transfer. And I don't think USC did him any favors. I think they
Mm.
were like 200th in the country in pass defense to be that low. But Damani Jackson is a kid that we could end up getting at a later pick, who's a
He transferred
real.
to Alabama, Brent. He
He
played
did.
first 2 years at USC and he didn't do much of anything. And then the last 2 years at Alabama, he played better.
He, yeah,
24, he played really well.
Yeah, he was again. I would describe it as disappointing. I mean, not because when you get a 5-star kid like that, it's like the kid uh, who was from Phoenix City, who was a 5-star kid, and he committed to Ohio State. He transferred. He went to Georgia, transferred to Penn State. AJ Harris is his name, and he lived just down the street from me, and we used to chat quite a bit. And he was a 5-star kid from Phoenix City, Alabama. And I would describe again, he's a really good kid, just like I think Damani Jackson is. But they just didn't achieve what I think that you would expect a 5-star corner, because there's not a lot of 5-star corners every year, right? You get one or two
Yeah.
5-star corners, and when you get put physically and because a lot of it is physical attributes, right size, right speed, height. And so Damani Jackson to me has the ability to be what a lot of corners who come in the third and fourth round end up doing. And then we didn't talk about this kid, the Clemson corner that I really think is, if we were to go corner in the first or second round, I think the kid from Clemson who is just an absolute
Avian Terrell.
playmaker. Yep,
Avian
Terrell.
Yep.
Yep, that's right. And so, as you start to look at our secondary, do you have players to kind of fit into your system that you could get either in the fourth round? A lot of the great safeties in the NFL weren't first round picks. Kirby wasn't, Branch wasn't. So, your ability to find safeties that can end up being playmakers at positions
Branch
of
was
need
projected to
specifically.
be the first. He fell. I think we all, but yeah, Kirby absolutely. And then we were like, why are we drafting this guy in the second round? And then we start to look at his tape, and we're like, this dude was a ball hawk. This dude was tracking balls at Illinois and picking off balls. And that's fantastic. Brent, I wanted to
Kirby
touch
was
on
a
this.
third rounder, by the way. He wasn't even a second.
I thought he was second, third round.
Third,
Okay,
third,
so there you go.
third
Branch
round,
was
yeah.
second. Yep.
All right, so Brent, I wanted to touch on this because obviously you go into drafts and everybody's talking about quarterbacks, okay, and here we are, the Detroit Lions, and obviously we have Jared Goff, and we're not. This is not a Jared Goff conversation. He's our starting quarterback, period. And he will be our starting quarterback next season. And there's nobody that can off seat him, right? Kyle Allen is his backup, right? And then who else is on the staff? I don't know, but
Nobody right now.
right. And so
Well,
so
even
when
if there were, it was
when we
nobody.
look at the Senior Bowl, we look at the Shrine Bowl, we look at this as like, at what point, like let's let's sort of shake our heads and shake the cobwebs of Hendon Hooker and any other quarterbacks which were just mistakes that were like, hey, let's draft a developmental guy and bring him on in the later rounds. Although Hendon Hooker wasn't necessarily later rounds at all, but Brent, let's talk about guys. There was a number of guys, whether it was Nussmeier from the Senior Bowl, Gronowski, the Iowa quarterback, Haynes King from Georgia Tech. Are we? What's your take on quarterbacks? Are the Lions just maybe potentially 5th round or later looking at a guy that we can kind of bring in and say, hey, let's take a flyer. Maybe we have a Brock Purdy. Maybe we've got a guy that we can develop that when Jared Goff goes down or Jared Goff goes off a cliff, retires, whatever, that we have a guy, because I think we can all agree Kyle Allen isn't exactly somebody we feel great about when Jared Goff goes down. What are your thoughts there, Brent?
Well, you hit on the guys that would be potential targets for the Lions to draft and develop in the 6th and 7th round. I really liked the way Gronowski managed the game. He was very predictable, or excuse me, very very physical, blocking a couple guys on that touchdown run. He can hit open receivers. He appeared calm in the pocket. Haynes King, I mean, the guy is just a competitor, and sometimes you need folks who end up becoming NFL coaches. We talked about this a couple shows ago, where players who are good end up being good coaches sometimes, and oftentimes were quarterbacks at some point in their career. They understand the game. So Haynes King would be attractive for one of those multiple 6th, 7th round picks. The value of having young guys is number one, especially that you draft late, is that they're going to be cheap, right? And when you find yourself in a position like we're in, with a salary cap being what it is, you wouldn't be in a bad situation to draft 2 quarterbacks and develop them, because just like the Cowboys did when they had Troy Aikman and what was his name that they drafted the
pissed
other
away that one pick in the
to
supplemental
Miami.
draft on Erickson.
Yeah,
He
and
was
so
too short, coming off a win.
well, they ended up trading him, didn't they? I thought they ended
They
up
had
trading
to.
him and
Yeah,
no, they got to. I mean, again, you get these young players, you draft them, you keep them, develop them for a couple of years. If you don't think they're going to be the future, you trade them and you get a draft pick for them. Because good quarterbacks don't grow on trees. So the Lions are in a position to where they're better off, I think, trying to draft and develop somebody, because if Jared Goff were to get injured, God forbid Jared Goff get injured, the Lions are
season's
gonna,
over if he does. I mean,
yeah, the
it is
Lions are
what
going
it
to be in a
is.
bad state.
Season's
like
over for a
teams.
lot of teams when their starting quarterback goes down.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I didn't mention the news, but I've been working on off-season positional analysis. I already published the quarterback one, and there's a lot of guys. This focuses more on just the draft. It's also about free agents to replace Allen potentially. CJ Beathard was the other guy that was on the practice squad. I don't think, they're both similar guys. Beathard came in late. I think they both are kind of the same guy, right? Although Beathard's a little bit older. We could definitely grab a free agent like, Teddy wants to keep playing. He'd be a good backup. I don't mind Kyle Allen as a backup. Another year, he's got a full year in the system now. He's not a terrible backup, but he's not Willis, who's going to probably command big dollars because he played so well for Packers, right? But in the draft, there's a couple guys I really think fit the mold. I don't see the Lions going out and getting a quarterback that is the complete opposite of Jared Goff. That's what we had with Hendon Hooker. Goff is cerebral, he's accurate. Hooker's not. Hooker played in an offense at Tennessee that is throw it deep. It's a very simple, basic offense. He never really learned how to play quarterback, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, he just wasn't a good fit in the system that we run. He was athletic. He was a big kid, but he just couldn't play the game. He couldn't play quarterback, right? So I see them going and looking for somebody, maybe like a Sawyer Robinson from Baylor, maybe a Tyler Van Dyke, in those 6th, 7th UDFA range, to bring that kind of a kid in. Big kid, similar size to Goff, big kids, I should say, similar size to Goff, smart, fairly accurate, have some flaws that can be coached up when you're in the NFL. That is your job. You're not worried about class, which probably most of these guys aren't anyway. You're not worried about chicks. You're not worried about partying. You're focused on getting better at your craft, right? To make money. And there's several good guys out there that do that. If we want to go a little bit earlier in the draft, and I have been panning this kid for years, but Penn State's Drew Aller might be somebody around like 4th or 5th. Again,
I'm sorry.
That dude has been. Listen, I agree with you. I think he.
Dan, you and I are going to come to
against
fisticuffs on this one.
Listen, though, has Penn State ever produced a good quarterback?
Yeah,
Kerry Collins.
Kerry Collins. I had drinks with him at the Pro Bowl in
okay.
Hawaii in '95.
I mean, Kerry
Collins was
that's
better
your
than
point.
okay.
He was the best quarterback. The best quarterback they produced in the last 30 years. What does that tell you?
On.
Their quarterbacks, coaches in their system sucked. They didn't get the most out of these kids. Aller's got talent. He just wasn't. They just didn't get out of it. I'm just saying. Look, he fits the profile. He'd be a kid you could probably grab in like the 5th round that you might hope you hit on.
I'm not looking at projections right now, but like when you said Drew Aller, like I just twitched, like I had like my body just went into convulsion. I was like, what round is Drew Aller even projected in at this point?
He's projected to hit the 4th to 5th round.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. I can't believe he's that high, but
again, he has the tools. He was in a system.
He was a Heisman hopeful. Like they thought he was going to be.
He
Heisman.
got hurt too,
of course.
But regardless, his accuracy, his passing, everything's there. He just needs coaching. He needs to be in the right system, right? And James Franklin, I mean, he did not do these kids right. None of these kids. The quarterbacks, they really struggled. The running game, they focus that. But anyway, I'm not going to argue about Aller. I'm just saying he's a potential guy. He's a
Drew
big kid.
Aller is going to be a
talent.
Conversation. It's going to be
we
a
can
conversation.
talk about it. And if they draft him, you're going to have to, you're going to,
he's
you're going to be
kid.
me talking about Hendon Hooker 2 years ago.
Exactly.
He's a big kid. He's a big kid. He's got a strong arm. So I think the physical attributes are there. I mean, again, Penn State's look. We know this. Ohio State had not put a starting quarterback in the NFL for many years. Penn State is the same. And look, I think Ohio State. You guys know I was a big fan of the Texans quarterback C.J. Stroud, and I actually wouldn't be unhappy with Aller in the 6th or 7th round. I'm not.
That's what I'm calling for. I'm not saying draft him before.
But you just
if
mentioned
you get a quarterback like
that
in the 6th or 7th round. Okay, I'm fine with it. But like Hendon Hooker, when he got picked, it was like, okay, he's sitting out a year. What are we doing? Right. And
plus he was almost as old as Goff.
Right.
He was
yes.
like 2 years younger than Goff.
Exactly.
Like, what the hell are we doing? This is not your quarterback of the future if he's 2 years younger than your starter.
Gentlemen, Brent, this has been an outstanding breakdown. For those of you who need more intel, not only is there an article right now on thegraymanes.com that DBC has authored and penned up there, but there will be more information that will be posted there. We're going to have more stuff as it relates to the draft, as it relates to these players. This is an ongoing thing that leads up to April and beyond. DBC, absolutely fantastic breakdown. Dan, great color as always for this. But, gentlemen, it's time for my favorite segment of Lions Gray Manes, and that is the Hall of the Underrated. All right, Gray Manes, we've talked about the future. Now let's honor the past. Every episode we induct a Detroit Lion into the Hall of the Underrated. players who've delivered excellence but never have gotten the flowers they deserved. Tonight's inductee is a name that should be spoken in the same breath as the greats, but somehow gets lost in the shuffle of Lions history. The one and the only Brett Perriman. From 1991 to 1996, Brett Perriman was one of the most productive wide receivers in the NFL, not just Detroit, but in the entire league. Let me give you the data, because this is the Gray Mains, and we bring receipts here, ladies and gentlemen. 1995, the season that should have made him a household name, 108 receptions. Let's let that sink in. 1,488 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns. That's 108 catches, ladies and gentlemen, in 1995, a 16-game season. He and Herman Moore were the first Lions in franchise history to record 100 receptions in a single season. But here's the kicker. He never made a Pro Bowl. Not once. Shedeur Sanders made a Pro Bowl this year, but not even in 1995, when he and Herman Moore became the most productive receiving duo in NFL history, a record that still stands today despite the league adding a 17th game. Moore and Perriman combined for 231 receptions and 2,700 yards in 1995. That's not just a Lions record, it's an NFL record for a receiving duo in a single season. And it's held for over 30 years. Brett played in the shadow of Barry Sanders, the greatest Lion of all time, during one of the most dysfunctional eras in the franchise history. He played through coaching chaos, front office instability, and playoff heartbreak. And despite all of that, he produced an elite level year after year after year. And yet, because the Lions didn't win, because Barry took up all the oxygen in the room, because the national media ignored Detroit like they always do, Brett Perriman, his name faded. But not here. Not here. Not on the Lions Gray Mains. Tonight, we induct Brett Perriman into the Lions Gray Mains Hall of the Underrated, a receiver who rewrote the franchise record book, set an NFL record with Herman Moore, and never got the recognition he deserved. Dan, Brent, let's talk about why Brett Perriman is a lock for this honor. Gentlemen, let's start here. DBC. Herman Moore just reminded us on social media. I don't know if you saw this post he put on X. He and Brett Perriman still hold the NFL record for the most combined receiving yards and receptions by a duo in a single season, right? That's a 16-game season, while today's players have 17 games to work with. Put that record into context for us. How dominant was that offense, and why does that record still stand?
Well, the thing that stood out to me about Brett Perriman, and we when we talked about Mel Gray and inducted him into the Hall of the Underrated a few weeks ago, was his size. 5'9" receiver, fearless, would run across the middle. He was prolific, what we'll call a great teammate. He was much like Benny Blades on the defensive side of the ball. He was the cheerleader, kind of the fire up guy on the offense. Coming from South Florida, he had good speed, and he really distinguished himself by just being the guy, the Robin to the Batman. He had no problem, with Herman Moore being the number one guy. He just wanted to have his catches. Every receiver goes back to the huddle and says, "I was wide open." And he had a couple great quarterbacks throwing to him. I love the way that Eric Kramer threw the football. Eric Kramer's passes were so catchable. He just threw this really, not that he had a weak arm, but there's quarterbacks that throw the ball and it hurts your hands and you're more inclined to drop them. But Kramer just threw this very catchable football. And then Scott Mitchell could really fit the ball into tight places and threw a good football. And so he had the luxury of having Barry Sanders in the backfield, Johnny Morton, and Herman Moore. And so that really opened the field up for him. And as I was watching the highlights, the 90 something yard catch that he had against the Bucks, where he kind of bobbled the ball coming past the secondary, is one of my favorite plays to watch over and over again. And the highlights that he had against the Bears, against the Packers, he was just a big game player. He showed up, and he caught contested footballs as well as anybody, 5'9", could do. He had pretty good vertical, and so the combination of having those quarterbacks and having the complementary players that he had around him, I think he was in a perfect position. Because if you look at the rest of his career, it was very nondescript. It was
Right.
just normal second receiver kind of statistics: 56 receptions, 49, 52. And look, those are good statistics. But those 2 seasons, and you referencing the all-time leaders in a single season in terms of receptions, those are the things that really jump out about Brett Perriman. And I know Dan's got some some great color to add here with Brett's career, and some little known facts, is Cliff Clavin, right? Are you going to be Cliff Clavin tonight, Dan? With the
I'm
it's a
gonna
little
throw
known
out some
fact.
names that are probably gonna make you guys cringe. Chris stole my thunder on the record, so we can't go down that path. But he was with the Lions for 6 years, right? And the first 4 years there was some instability, even though we're talking all 6 years were the tail end. The last 6 years, Wayne Fontes was the head coach, right? So, he went 12-4 in 91, 5-11, 10-6, 9-7, 10-6, then 5-11. Everybody got fired, right? So, but you look at this, you mentioned his quarterbacks. The first 3 years he's in the league, he's playing with Kramer and Pete, and then Ware. You got that three-headed shit show of a quarterback that we had going on. And
Yep.
Kramer
Yep.
Kramer played well, but when you have more than one quarterback, you have no quarterbacks. I mean,
Right.
that's the rule. And those guys, we didn't have a quarterback. None of them separate themselves. But yet during that time frame in 91, obviously Barry was getting the ball at 12-4. 91 was probably the greatest year prior to 2 years ago that the Lions have had in the last 30 years. We opened by getting just dusted by the Skins, and then we closed the season in the playoffs in the championship game by getting dusted by the
Busted
Skins,
by the
right?
skin.
But in between, Barry Sanders played great. And the funny thing is, along the way, Brett Perriman was our number one wide receiver.
Yeah.
Guy only had 668 yards that year. But, our receiving core was Robert Clark, Willie Green, Mike Farr, and a little known rookie who barely got any catches, and then by this guy named Herman Moore.
Yeah.
How in the hell do you not use Herman Moore as a rookie? Oh, I know why. Because Dave Levy was the damn offensive coordinator. Him and Dan Henning, over the first 4 years of Brett's career, they killed this offense. And guess what? Guess what unlocked him? The guy, the man, the guru who just retired at 92 or something like that,
Oh,
Tom Moore. Tom Moore came on
Tom
board
Moore,
in
legend.
1995. These are the numbers. You mentioned 95, Moore, Perryman, both over 100 catches. Moore had 1,686 yards that year. Perryman, 1,488. In 96, even though we went 5-11, Moore was 1,296 and Perryman was 1,021. Those are the only 2 years of his career where he had 1,000 yards receiving.
and Barry
And
still had 1,000-something yards.
He did. He had 1,000 yards rushing. Although he might have gotten injured in 96. That was the year when he hurt his knee, I think, or potentially. Oh, Mike can
It
look
was
that
it
up.
was, but he still had 1,000 yards every year, right?
Yeah. He had 1,500 yards in 1995 because the passing game became much more prevalent because Mitchell just, for as much as we thought, and many people panned Mitchell, he played very well that year. We were 10-6, made the playoffs. But that offense was something special those few years with Moore running it. He knew how to get the most out of every single one of those guys. And he
Interesting.
leaned on
Oh,
him.
sorry.
No, you're good. You're
I
good.
thought, but Tom Moore, the players used to talk about how messy he was.
Yeah.
They went into his office, and it was just mounds and mounds of paper where he was like a mad scientist. He would draw up plays, and paper everywhere, just the way that they did it back in those days.
Oh yeah. I mean, I know a guy that absolutely adored him too, and he won a Super Bowl with him. And His name was Peyton. So
Peyton Manning.
yeah, he was over in Indy. He left the Lions, went to Indy at one point, and I think what he ended his career in Tampa this last year. As a consultant. But one of the greatest minds ever. But we're here talking about Brett. But Brett, he was unlocked. Tom knew how to unlock Perryman. Perryman was really good before,
Yes.
and Tom Moore made him great. He said, okay, Herman's the lead guy at 6'4". He's not a blazer. He's 6'4", runs probably a 4.6, but he's the best contested catcher until Randy Moss showed up, and then Calvin Johnson. But Brett, he utilized him on those under routes, those shallow crossers. He knew how to get him in space and get the ball in his hand and let him do damage. And Mitchell was good at delivering the ball, catchable ball, right? You're right. Kramer had a great ball.
Eric Kramer
He didn't have much of an arm.
He's got some records, like
he does. I mean, he played his best ball with the Bears after he left
yes,
us,
Yes.
And
that Dallas game was beautiful.
yeah,
Kramer could chuck it.
He could, and Rodney Pete wasn't that bad either. He just couldn't stay healthy.
Right.
For a 6th-round pick, he was the Heisman Trophy backup that, the year he was at USC, but then he just couldn't stay healthy, and Charlie Batch wasn't there anymore. I don't think. I don't know. He might have come after Mitchell, but
I remember getting pelted with soft batch cookies in Kansas City.
Did they have lead paint chips in them?
They had,
those
little packs of soft batch cookies. They were throwing them all over.
Guys, I've got to do this. I've got to get us back on the rails here with Brett Perriman. So let me ask you this, Brent. If Brett Perriman played in today's NFL, maybe in Ben Johnson's offense, maybe in Drew Petzing's offense, Dan Campbell's offense, with Jared Goff throwing him the ball, what kind of player do you think he would be? Does his skill set sort of translate to the modern game? What do you think?
I think if he were to play in today's day and age, he'd be a lot like Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra is a guy that will run those crossing routes. He's able to have enough speed to be able to create separation, and so I think the best comp that I could come up with. He's probably a little bit faster than Amon-Ra, if I'm not wrong. Mm-hmm. But he did run good routes, and I think that the Lions offense in many ways felt like it was a pickup game. Just slinging the ball everywhere, and Scott Mitchell had his best season that year that Dan was talking about in '95. And it was a lot of fun to watch. So he would need to be under more discipline and structure. And I think in playing for the Lions today, I think he'd be a lot like Amon-Ra St. Brown. He would have consistent 100 reception years like Amon-Ra does.
I would disagree slightly, because the one thing that Perryman lacks that St. Brown has is not only the frame, but also the fortitude to block. When he was on the field,
is a big part.
He didn't have to block for Barry. Barry made the blocks for him, and he was good at getting in the way, but he was pretty slight. He's only 175 pounds. Yeah. I don't know how his kid ended up being like 6'4", like 220 or whatever.
Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about his son Brashad Perriman. I'm not sure if he's currently employed by an NFL team, but as of last year, I think he was with Tampa or Baltimore.
But I just don't think Brett would. I mean, I know he would try. That was just his mentality. He would give it a go. I just think physically, size-wise, at 5'9", 175, whatever it is, he's definitely. I think I wouldn't compare him to St. Brown. I'd compare him actually to who's our kick returner. That's who I compare it to. Is Khalif Raymond. That's who he is, and I think that in the right offense where they're not asking them to do blocking, I think he would definitely excel if he was the slot guy as a third wide receiver. It's a different game now than it was then,
Sure.
So it's much more wide receiver driven, but the wide receivers have to be well rounded. They don't see the field. So
I think the thing about Brett, Dan, is if you watch the Barry Sanders highlight runs, when Barry cuts back and you'll see Brett blocking, and sometimes there's a couple times where he had his hands up in the air, right?
Yeah,
He's just
he's
running
running
interference like you were describing.
That's
But
exactly it.
he was a good blocker. And again, we're talking about two eras. And so, the
Yeah.
receivers back in those days, the emphasis was not like it is today on blocking. And the reason that I compared him to him also was that Brett would just go across the middle. I mean, there's so few receivers that have the courage to
Fearless.
just run those crossing routes. And Amon-Ra, those skinny posts and those crossing routes, the ins, outs. Yeah, I think I'll stand by my comp. He is definitely smaller. Amon-Ra's what, 6'1", 6'1", and his dad was Mr. Universe.
Yeah. I think Amon's like 5'11", isn't he?
So the frame,
Yeah, but the other thing, you made a good point there,
yeah,
Brett.
I don't know.
The difference is the wide receivers back then, they weren't put into the weight room and done the training that the guys do nowadays. I mean, they're getting it from the high school level all the way through college into the NFL. So not only are they on, back then it was about the jugs, it was about the route running, crispness, things like that, just enough strength to not get knocked off your route. Nowadays, you look at these guys, some of these guys. I mean, look at DK Metcalf. The dude's like a freaking bodybuilder, He's a big kid, and he's just all muscle. And you're seeing more and more of that with the wide
AJ
receivers, even
Brown.
the little guys. Yeah, even the little guys. I mean, they realize that this, and this may be one of the reasons why the injuries have increased in the NFL too. They are bigger, they're faster, they're stronger at every position. And you have to offset that to be able to stay on the field. Otherwise, you're just going to get broken in half.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for indulging us in Lions, Gray Mane's Hall of the Underrated. Brett Perriman, half of the most productive receiving duo in NFL history, but 0 Pro Bowls, 0 national recognition, but pure Hall of the Underrated. Herman Moore said it best, legacy doesn't compete with the present, it completes it. And Brett Perriman's legacy is a part of what makes today's Lions offense so special. Amon-Ra and Jamison Williams are chasing the standard that Brett and Herman set 30 years ago. That's the power of honoring the past. It gives today's players something to chase. It gives fans something deeper to belong to. And it gives the franchise the weight it deserves. Brett Perriman, welcome to the Lions Gray Mane's Hall of the Underrated. You earned it. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Lions Gray Manes tonight. And as always, we like to say, go Lions. We'll get it.
Bust it outside left. Jameer down to the 10. Jameer to the 5. Jameer to the end zone. Touchdown, Detroit Lions.
And off Barry, skirts to the left side, breaks a tackle, and he will take it in. Touchdown!
Touchdown, Detroit Lions.